So how you doing, JJ?
I'm okay. I'm all
Okay.
right.
I spoke to you, I guess, I don't know when it was, maybe 6 months ago or something. This has brought you been the most changing year of your life. Good energy.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm a super extroverted kind of person and I've been isolated. I also have really bad lungs, so I was really scared of this virus going around. So I've been isolated for most of the last year and a half.
Hmm.
Been very different for me when I used to be going, have somewhere to be every single evening,
Yeah.
all weekend. So
So you are you're a writer, you're a concert promoter, cable house shows, but you have done more than that. You have York Story Slam.
mhm.
You've spent probably as long as I've known you, all your life building scenes.
Mhm.
Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think of it as building community, but that's
Hmm.
that's what a scene is. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, um, how did you get your start in all this?
Um, well, I started working for nonprofits in the late '90s,
Hmm.
and I accidentally ended up in fundraising. And I won't bore you with that story, but it was kind of like I was a warm body to help out during
Yeah.
a busy time in the fundraising office at the nonprofit where I worked. And it turned out that it suited my personality and my interests and my um, sense of obligation to my community it
Hmm.
really well. So event planning just sort of fell into my purview during that time, and that suited me really well too, so I just kept going with it. So yeah, I've been planning events and building community building scenes
Yeah.
for more than 20 years
Did you
now.
ever do anything else?
Well, I feel like I've done a lot of different things, but they all sort of have these common threads of building
Yeah. Okay,
community going
good.
through
Yeah.
them.
So so it's the kind of thing, once you found your purpose, um, there is no number two. There is no backup plan.
Right.
we're
And that's
gonna
gotten
we're gonna
cool over the
we're gonna
years.
drive this car into the sun.
Yeah, that's really gotten me into some trouble personally.
I I I remember some stuff that yeah, you had some lean years. Some
Yeah,
lean years, yeah.
it was really tough because I kept saying, I taught a class at York College for a little while on special event planning, and I used to tell my students, don't be the kind of person who says they should have this in my town or they should do this differently. Like, who the hell do you think you're they
Yeah.
the thing that you want? So in order to walk that
Be the
walk,
change.
right. So, I was traveling a lot for live music, for storytelling events. And so anytime I was like, well, why don't we have this in my town? I would be like, well, I guess
What would Professor JJ say?
right, right, right.
Yeah.
So I would just start it up. And so um I did this over and over until I had all these programs I was running as a volunteer. And then, at one point I had, I think, 5 part-time jobs to try to support my social entrepreneurship habit, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't sustainable. I was working like 90 hours a week.
Hmm.
And at one point I ended up in the hospital. Like, you're physically, when you try to do too much and take too much on, your body is going to respond to that. So,
Yeah.
um, it just wasn't sustainable. And yet I felt like it would be really letting the community down to walk away from many of them.
Hmm.
So I had to find a way to make it sustainable, or the other option was to burn it all to the ground, leave York for a while and come back and start over, and I really didn't want to do that. And I was very fortunate to have found a way to make it my full-time focus
Yes.
a couple years ago.
And how was that?
Well, we found an anonymous, generous donor who believed in what I was doing and agreed to pay my salary for 2 years so that I could focus on it full time. And a nonprofit to be the sort of fiscal agent for that grant and give
Hmm.
me, as sort of a match to that grant, office space, health insurance,
Yeah.
ah, um, and try it out and see after 2 years what they wanted to do. And so that started in 2019. So I had a full year of focusing on the programs. The quality of all of them, as you can imagine, went up because they were getting my full attention.
Yeah.
The attendance went up. I mean, everything just got so much better. Then in early 2020, we know what happened. And for an event planner, all the events went away. So I shifted my focus a little bit and have kept really busy anyway. But I was worried at the end of that second grant year when I wasn't hosting any events, what was going to happen. But the York County Economic Alliance, who is my employer, said, no, we want to continue this. We, obviously believe in these programs and know they're going to come back soon. And they took me on as a permanent employee.
That's wonderful. That's such a success story.
That's such a relief.
We all love a success story, seriously, because so people who don't know, I think there's a void in a lot of what York could be, and culturally, musically. Actually, it's in the last years, it's coming up dramatically to the people like you. It's like you always promoted the best stuff. That, in other words, I always go to you for what is the cool music, because you've heard of 10 people I've never even heard of, and they're all great. But so who were some of your mentors? Did you learn how to do this? I'm sorry, some of this is learned on the fly, I'm guessing, but you had help along the way.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of concert promoting specifically, it was really Sean Kenny who taught me how to do that. He started the Cap Live concert series, I don't even know what year, quite a while ago. And he was finding that he was having to say no to shows where a band wasn't a big enough draw to bring enough people into the Capitol Theater. They just didn't have the name recognition yet. And that room is like around 575 capacity, I think, or 475, sorry. And then at the other end of that spectrum, we have Sign of the Wagon, which is a couple blocks east of there.
Yeah.
Really great house concert venue, more like an audience size of 50 people.
Yeah.
And there was nothing in between. So Sean's idea, and he was also on the board of Central Market at the time, and Central Market was available for people to rent for private events, but most people didn't know that. So it sat dark, other than maybe like First Fridays, some of the vendors would be open, but the market's open Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday until 2 p.m. Other than that, it's this gorgeous building. It had recently been renovated and it was sitting there empty. And it's especially gorgeous at night because during that renovation, they did all the uplighting. And so Sean's idea was, well, we could turn that into a listening room. And then we've got a mid-size capacity for these up and coming national touring acts. And I don't have to say no, we can right size them between those three places. So he recruited me. I recruited two other volunteers, Philip Given and Karen Swartz, and the four of us launched this series. And Sean really taught me, sent me samples of how he was booking bands for Cap Live and kind of those formulas of, this much of a guarantee. Here's the budget that you send to a booking agent. And then kind of how you negotiate and navigate that process. That was all brand new to me. I had booked tons of local bands. I had booked all kinds of events with entertainment, but nothing specifically like this, like the concerts I was attending as a guest. So Sean showed me how to do that. At the end of that first season, we launched in fall of 2014 after, about a year of planning and fundraising and everything. And then at the end of the season, our final show of that first year was on my birthday, June 19th, 2015. The other three people that were on the Kable House team were kind of like moving on to whatever their next project was. They were like, you're welcome to keep it going. We're moving on from it to different projects.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of left holding the ball and having to make the decision, do we want to keep it going or not? And I really loved what we were building, so I did. So at the back end, it's been a one woman operation all this time. We host about 10 shows a year. I had a little bit of help with some social media stuff, and then on event day, we have volunteers that are very faithful to it who come and help check people in at the door and put the together at the end of the night and that kind of thing. So people have been really supportive. They buy season tickets without knowing who's going to be in the lineup that season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I book 4 to 6 months out. They're buying tickets almost a year in advance.
Yeah.
So I take that, that's an honor to me, and I take that very seriously. You mentioned that I have introduced you to bands. I have one friend who calls me her music Sherpa.
You're my music sensei.
Yeah, I really love introducing people to their next favorite band that they might not have discovered on their own, or had maybe heard of and wouldn't have an opportunity to see them. So that's one of my most favorite things, and Kable House allows me to do that.
It seems like you say 10 a year. It seems like it's so much more.
It feels like more sometimes. You know, but we've hosted since September 2014. Our very first show was with Raylan Baxter. And the opener was Mike McMonagle. He lives over in Lancaster, local guy. He actually went to college with Raylan, and I was really, really excited to present that. I think Sean was still booking our series at that point and pulled that off. And so Mike McMonagle of Lancaster was the very first performer to ever be on our stage.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've hosted more than 60 shows with well over 6,000 butts in seats, as we say, tickets sold.
Mm-hmm.
And the number I'm most proud of course, is that we've paid out almost $64,000 directly to artists.
Mm-hmm.
We try to have a pretty good guarantee for the size of the room we are, and our audience really, really supports the artists too. They buy merch. They're very, reverent when they're there in the room. They're not talking. I give a curtain speech before every show that says, if you want to talk, step outside and your handstand gets you back in. Don't talk during the show. And there were 2 times in those 60, however many shows, that I did not do that. And both times I had season ticket holders come up to me afterwards and complain. They're like, you didn't say the thing, and the lady behind me was talking. And a couple times I've asked people to leave. I'm like, I get it if this wasn't what you thought you signed up for. You can't stand in the back and be loud and drunk. I'll give you your money back. Go to a bar. There's, 6 bars within a block of here. No hard feelings, but go. That's not what this is. So, the people that come are really very interested in the music. They want to hear these songs, this original music. And I love that. I mean, that's when I go to shows at other places, I want that. So, we built that here.
So, for those who don't know, that these are all the main, you have an opening act usually, right? And then you have the main artist, and they're national, but under the radar. I would say under the radar, because I'm always introduced to people like that because of you. So you supported the local musician too. It's not just a national thing. So so who are some of the people that you have what are your success stories?
Well, that last show of the first season that was happened to fall on my birthday, so I'll always remember the date of it, 19th, 2015. We hosted the Suffers. That was our very first sold out show, and Sean booked them. And shortly after that, they announced they were going to be on Letterman. It was right around the time he was retiring, and I was like, oh, cool, they're about to blow up. And right after that announcement, the show sold out, and we had so many people packed in there. We actually don't do shows in there in June anymore, because I get there at 2 p.m. to start moving the furniture by myself and getting set up. And it is so hot. So it was really hot that day. I rented a couple of like industrial size fans, and it just blew the hot air around. It didn't really help. But it was such a blast. They were in, I think at the time they were a 10-piece with horns.
Okay.
The opener was Shrimp Boat, a band that no longer exists, but we get a lot of requests for. Our audience loved them. Based in Columbia, Bobby Gentilo's band. And they were an 8-piece. So, I mean, it was it was a lot of people, and it was so much fun. And since then, of course, there's no way we could put them in a room that small anymore. So you get to say, if you were there, I saw the Suffers in this, 160 cap room. We had about 200 people in the room. It was oversold, but in this small space, and now they're really well known. We had Strand of Oaks before he really got to be as well known as he is now. We've had Grammy nominees and winners. So, and then mixed in there, it's bands, like you said, you've never heard of, that you leave with, an album in your hand and a smile on your face. So I think every one of those shows, with very few exceptions, I would count as success stories.
Yeah. Wonderful. And okay, so you'd make the yearly pilgrimage to the Newport Folk Festival. Tell us what that means to you. That is like your it's like church.
Yeah, I've got the logo for that tattooed on my leg. That's how much it means to me. So I started going to that, and that also was kind of facilitated by Sean Kenny. Now that I'm thinking of this, yeah, I'd like to count Sean as a mentor. One of my favorite bands, my favorite album that came out in 2011 was Middle Brother, and it's pull it out while we're talking. It's like a super group side project. Matt Vasquez from Delta Spirit, which is probably my favorite band. I don't know if I could name a favorite band, but among my favorite bands, John McCulley from Deer Tick, Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes. They did this. They did a showcase at South by Southwest, and then did an album from it. This is it. It was my favorite album that year. They did a really small run of shows, but it was just not economically possible. And they were touring with their other bands. Like, this band was not going to be like a thing that was kept going. So they announced they were going to be at Newport Folk Fest. It was probably going to be their last show as a group. And I had heard of Newport. I mean, everyone who's into music has heard of it. It's where Dylan went electric and the Pixies went acoustic, and it's got this very storied history.
And Pete Seeger wanted to cut the wires.
Yes. I have some good Pete Seeger stories. I also have Pete Seeger's banjo tattooed on me right next to the Newport logo.
Okay.
He helped me found the Newport Folk Fest, and he's one of my heroes. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, it's time to go to this. And it had recently been taken over by somebody else was producing it, and it was seeing a little bit of a renaissance that was just starting in 2011. So we got tickets. I went with Sean and his wife and a few other people, and absolutely fell in love with it. You want to talk community, the sense of community they build around that is, I mean, like nothing else I've ever experienced. And it goes all year long, and it's spectacular. So when I first started going, it was during the day on 2 days. And then eventually over the years, they added in evenings and then added in a third full day. There's after parties and shows every night. It's just from the time I get into town the first night and I start getting together with people I only see once a year for dinner, to the time I leave, a couple days later, I sleep like 12 hours the whole entire time I'm there, because it's, cramming in. It's like a big family reunion.
Yeah.
But the thing about Newport, and what I've tried to model, excuse me, with Kable House Presents, is the focus is entirely on the music. There's no ego involved. A lot of the artists that play, no matter how well known they are, just walk around the festival grounds. People leave them alone. They might say hello, but they're not,
not being fanny.
They're letting them enjoy it. It was Jack White that said, in however many years, he had never been able to do that at a festival, and he got to do that. He walked around with a Polaroid taking pictures of people for the day. And there's a video on YouTube of him on the main stage playing. He may have been playing Goodnight Irene, which for me has a lot of meaning. And he gets choked up and turns away. You can see he's crying. It's an overwhelmingly positive experience. It's where I feel most at home. It's where the only 3 days of the year where I'm not thinking about anything else but that experience. And I spend the whole rest of the year, I usually have a countdown timer on my phone, 24/7, until I get to go back. I'm living my whole life to get back there, so
yes. Well, you're creating the kind of and I'm sure this is this, you're creating a little Newport in York.
Oh, what a compliment.
It's yeah.
Yeah, whether I'm, consciously trying to do that or not, that's always kind of what I'm doing is trying to
Yeah.
recreate that feeling for the people here.
So let's see. Who are your people? When we talk about Kable House people, it's not just Kable House either. We could talk about your en route York.
Mhm.
Is that the big umbrella? Is that your big umbrella?
Yeah, it's funny because when we were designing the logo, I actually was going to put an umbrella in the logo because that's how I think of it. It's collectively the 6 programs I'm responsible for are called en route. I don't really market that as its own thing necessarily because all the programs have distinct audiences, but it's useful. And I like not, getting people out of the habit of just calling them JJ's programs.
Yeah.
They're really meant for everybody. So yeah, it's 6 programs and all started in the last 10 years or so. And yeah, my people are people who care about community. My music people are people who are, I'll use the word reverent again, who really want to support an artist and see them grow, and be excited for them. My people are people who cry at live music shows, basically, or the people I meet. When I go to shows, I get there an hour before doors and I'm lined up, even if there is no line, I'm queued up ready to go because I want to be right up against the stage. I go to shows by myself a lot and I meet other people who do that too. And those are people that my favorite people in life in general are people who you meet and 5 minutes later you feel like you've known them forever. And I find there are a lot of people like that in the music community.
So now let's talk about York Story Slam.
Okay.
The idea of that came, other cities have had it. Is that?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so you went to other cities and you saw that they were happening in these locations. Why doesn't York have this? Okay.
Yeah, I started out with Story Slams by listening to the Moth radio hour, and then which WXPN played. I don't know if they still do or not on a certain night of the week. And then I started listening to the podcast, and then I thought we probably have live events like this somewhere near here. Storytelling is sort of a popular concept, so I Googled live storytelling events in the region, and Lancaster Story Slam came up in the Google search. They had just started like a month before I did this Google search. So I started attending right when they began. And, like I do with everything, I made friends with the people who run it and they helped me figure out how to start one in York the following year. So they started a year before us and we have the same kind of visual branding. We use mostly the same format. And theirs started because there was one in Westchester and Delaware County. One of the people that went to those moved to Lancaster, so she started one in Lancaster, then helped me start one in York. I helped somebody start one in Shippensburg 2 years ago. There's one in Harrisburg, and we're all kind of branded similarly. So we're sort of part of the same family. And in the last year, since we've had to go virtual, we co-produce with Lancaster Story Slam. So, we're running York Story Slam on the 3rd Tuesday of the month and helping to run Lancaster Story Slam on the 4th Tuesday of the month. And we run them exactly the same on
So what's
Zoom.
the concept of it?
It's an open mic storytelling event where anybody can take a turn and tell a true first person story. So you're, the central character, or at least a central character. It's not a story about, your great great grandfather before you were ever born, but something that happened to you. True story, about 5 minutes long, based on whatever the theme is that month. We have a different theme every month. The themes are announced for the whole year, before we start. So you have time to think about it. And normally when we're in person, you would get there that night and put your name in the hat. So it's not curated at all. And then we pull 10 names that night. to let people tell stories. With the virtual ones, we have people sign up in advance because we do a little tech rehearsal to make sure Zoom is working. But we take 8 storytellers and it fills up always,
Mhm.
right away. I announced yesterday that registration is open for storytellers for our June 15th event, and there's already 4 people signed up. So they're
That
halfway.
sounds like something I would want to be a part of.
It's so much fun.
Well, yeah, in other words, I think like communication, storytelling, all that kind of stuff. I have an interest in it. I don't know how good I am, but I reserve the right to stink in order to get better. You got to start somewhere.
I've watched people who are really nervous to get up in front of people and talk into a
Yeah.
microphone, and they do it once or twice, and then they're not intimidated by it anymore, because it's a very friendly audience. At York Story Slam in particular, we don't have a stage. We're in the back room at Holy Hound when we're in person. So
Yeah.
you're standing at the same level with, your pint glass in your hand in the back room of the pub. It's very informal.
Yeah.
Lancaster has a stage, but it's still, in all of these events that I've ever attended or hosted, it's a very supportive audience. They want to hear your story. They're interested in what you have to say. They want you to do a good job. So if you get nervous, they kind of cheer you on a little more. And
Okay.
yeah, and there's
I'm telling the world this. I'm throwing this out into the universe. This
right.
will be mine.
And the themes are broad enough that we get people interpreting it a lot of different ways. So you'll hear in the same night a story that makes you cry, and then a story that makes you laugh until you cry, and everything in between. It's really just, it's fantastic. You're hearing from your neighbors, whether you're friends or strangers or whatever, you're getting to hear what people from your community have going on in their lives. And it's really interesting. And going virtual has meant that it removed any geographic boundaries, or anybody that has, little kids or for whatever reason can't get out to a bar on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Now attend. We've made it free. You can give a contribution, but you don't need to. It's free to register and to get the link to watch. So it's really made it more accessible to more people. And it's also made it accessible to people who maybe always wanted to tell a story, but really
didn't have a stage.
they didn't like the idea of, getting up there. And so this is like a stepping stone to that, where they've gotten used to doing it on Zoom, and they're, feeling more comfortable. And so when we get back in person, I think they probably will get up in front of the microphone and won't be so nervous about it.
Yeah. How long do you think that's going to be?
Oh, that's a great question, Rod. We've been talking about this a lot. And I think even when we go back to in person, we'll still do at least some virtual events, so that, the people that can't get there in person. And also, we sell out every month when we're at the Hound. I only sell 60 tickets, and it sells out ahead of time every time. And people want to come and can't because they didn't get tickets in time. So Zoom takes that barrier away. I can take as many people as want to come. But I don't know that we're going to get together in person anytime soon. Might not happen till our Grand Slam in November. I left this out when I was explaining it. There is a competition aspect to it. That's not the main focus, but we do have a winner every month, and all the winners get to come back and compete at the end of the year for the title of Best Storyteller in York in our Grand Slam. And that's held in the Capitol Theater. And that's a bigger deal with a stage and everything. And,
did all the Story Slams have that Grand Slam? Okay. Yeah. So who has won it?
The very first year, it was a guy named Brad Jennings, and we have something we call the Brad Jennings rule. Our very first event in 2016, January, Brad won. He came back in February and he won again. And we were like, wait. If you win every month, there's only going to be one person in the Grand Slam. That's not going to work. So our Brad Jennings rule is, if you win one, we welcome you to continue. We hope you will continue telling stories throughout the year, but you no longer are in the running to win that month.
Yeah.
So you can't win more than once in the same year. But Brad won, of course, the Grand Slam, and then has been the MC for it every year since then.
Okay. Brad Jennings. Okay, so musicians, some of the things you're a concert promoter, please tell us give us your best advice for these up and coming musicians about, I know this is something that is dear to you.
It is. I want Kable House Presents to be an opportunity for local and regional musicians to be introduced to our audience. And so whenever I can book a local opener, I do. A lot of times the bands are touring with support, and so I don't get to book the opener. It's whoever they're touring with. But when I can, I try to book a local or regional act that's a good fit. It's tough though. If they're playing free gigs the 3 nights before and the 3 nights after, it's maybe tough to sell tickets to one for their local fans. But for the most part, I'm trying to get them in there, get them in front of our audience, let our audience know where they can see them again after they've seen them there. But my advice is, take it seriously. And when a promoter is telling you, here's what I need, this is true of any events, not just musicians at shows.
Yeah.
If you're being hired as an entertainer or a vendor, anything, and the person hiring you gives you all the information, here's what I need and when I need it by, do that. Send the information. If I'm having to chase somebody down for a stage plot or input list or whatever, or, a good quality promo photo, or what web address I'm supposed to be sending people to, and hopefully it's an actual website or even a Bandcamp page, but not a Facebook page. That's not a website. Somewhere where they can find your music and information about you. Send that to me when I ask for it, and don't make me ask you 15 times. Send it by the deadline. I'm trying to put your name in front of people. I'm called a promoter because I'm trying to promote you.
Yes.
And get you in front of an audience. So just do what's asked of you. And I understand a lot of times for some of the local and regional ones, it's not their full-time job. But if they aspire for it to take up more of their focus and time, treat it like a business and be professional. That's the most important thing. Some of the local and regional people we've hired more than once, it's because they have made that leap and they are making it their full-time focus. And so they tend to be the ones that act the most professionally and are the easiest to work with because they've kind of figured out what it means to do that.
Yeah. It's like that's the kind of energy you want, kicking and screaming, dragging you,
Yeah.
That's bad energy. It slows. Yeah. So
at that point, it doesn't matter how good your music is if I can't get it in front of people,
Yeah. Right. Okay. Top 4 new bands that I never heard of.
Oh man, Rod. Well, right now I'm listening to a lot of Black Pumas, but hopefully you've heard of them because they are big shit right now. They played the Biden inauguration virtual live stream concert. They've been on all the late night shows and whatever. Oh man, I'm listening to the new Allison Russell album a lot. She's one half of the duo Birds of Chicago.
Okay.
Gorgeous voice. She's also part of Our Native Daughters. And they've won Grammys. So maybe you've heard of them, but her solo stuff is her debut solo album and it's lovely. What else? There's a new Parker. Have you heard of Parker Millsap?
Yeah.
Okay, scratch him then. But he has a new record and it's really good.
No, don't scratch. I've heard of him, but yeah.
Yeah, he has a new record out. I'm a really big fan of his. He's one I've never been able to book. His booking agent doesn't give me the time of day, but he's really good. Oh man, putting me on the spot. I try to listen to a lot of music, but I find I go back to the same couple of albums over and over and over, no matter what if I have in the rotation. I listen to so much John Paul White that it's kind of obscene. I love his voice, I love his songwriting, I love everything about his record that came out 2 years ago now. Is among my most favorites of all time, and I have the record for when I'm in the house and the CD for
in the car.
The CD for in the car.
So he replaced Frank Turner.
Nobody will ever replace Frank Turner. Let's get that straight.
Let's make that known.
But both of them are, in my top favorite songwriters for sure, and they're so different. John Paul White is this very, it's like a Maripolitan. Sounds like kind of the old country songwriting tradition, and yet it's also, he brings something new to it, but gorgeous voice. Seems like a really nice dude too, and he runs Single Lock Records. Cedric Burnside is on that label, and we've hosted Cedric. I've hosted him in my house. actually. But he played Kable House Presents, and that was a sold out show shortly before COVID. Really wonderful. He's a Mississippi Hill Country Blues guy.
Okay.
Were you at that show? Did you come to that one?
I don't think so.
Man, he's so good. He's the grandson of R.L. Burnside.
Okay.
And when he was like, I don't know, 14 or something, started playing the drums for R.L. He called him his big daddy, for his big daddy, going on tour with him. But he's really great. And I think he has a new record. That's
He's a drummer.
Yeah. So for his sets, when he's touring, part of it, he's behind the drum kit, and part of it, he's playing guitar, and he has somebody with him and swaps out. Really great dude too. Like I said, he stayed at my house. A lot of the bands crash at my house.
Yeah.
To keep our costs down and keep their costs down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that. And I know that you've heard of Aaron Lee Tasjan, but I'm gonna recommend him too, because he has a new record out that's really great. And he's just kind of constantly evolving as an artist, and another just really wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say too, if you follow Kable House Presents, it's Kable House with a K, on YouTube. I've started, since we're not hosting shows and I can't introduce you to bands that way, the like light scaled back version of that is I've been making seasonal playlists of new stuff I'm listening to, whether it's new releases or old stuff that I'm just getting into. Every 2-3 months I'm posting a new playlist of songs on there, so it's a little sampler. So I recommend doing that.
Yeah. Thank you, JJ.
Sure.
Thank you. So who is next? What is going on with Kable House in the future?
Well, it looks like we're probably going to switch to a calendar year season. We always went, August, September through May or so. And that's always been kind of an administrative nightmare. So with what's going on, with COVID and everything, I think that's giving us an opportunity to switch to a calendar year. So we'll probably start our regular season back up in January. I'm hoping by then everybody's gotten vaccinated and it's safe and normal to get together in a small room, shoulder to shoulder. In the meantime, we may have a couple of the rescheduled shows from before all this derailed us.
Yeah.
If those bands are able to tour again, like as things start back up. I mean, there are so many venues that they've had expenses, but they've had no income now for 1.5 years. I helped lobby for federal relief funding all of last year. That's what I spent a lot of time on. And the legislation was passed in December. There's $15 billion that's been allocated to help saving those small independent venues. $0 of it has been distributed.
That's wonderful.
Point. Yeah, but none of it has gotten to the people yet. The administration in distributing those dollars has been a nightmare. So that money hasn't gotten into the hands of the venues yet. And we're hearing about venues still every day that are closing because they just can't wait any longer. One of my favorite venues closed down in Philly, and I'm still really sad about it because that was one where I watched their calendar because it was a similar size room with similar kinds of bands that they booked. So I would watch their calendar to see, if we could piggyback on the bookings, and they're gone now. So how did I get off on this tangent? So when the venues are able to start opening again, and when the bands are able to safely tour again, because if they're national touring acts, the restrictions have to be lifted in a bunch of states, not just ours.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but when they're able to do that, we will certainly reschedule them and get them back on the calendar and host those events for our audiences. And then start back up, start fresh in January, I think. So hopefully we will have a mild winter and we'll be able to host shows and not worry about bad weather.
All right.
But we'll see how that goes. But, the community has been really supportive of us, even as we haven't been able to host shows. We've now been through 2 annual fundraising cycles. Give Local York is our main source of revenue.
Yeah.
We will never, I don't know if people understand the economics of this either. We will never, ever break even on ticket sales. I lose an average of $1,000 per show, 1 to 2. And I make that up through, because we're not a traditional venue, we're a pop-up where I rent out the space. We make that up with fundraising, and our last 2 Give Local York campaigns, we've raised enough now to cover the expenses for our next season, whenever that's
Yeah.
the silver lining to not being able to host shows, but still being able to do fundraising virtually.
Yeah.
So we'll start off in a pretty strong financial position. We're an anomaly in that way. Most of our fellow independent venues are actual brick and mortar locations that have had to continue paying insurance and, whatever expenses during all of this. So rent, mortgage, whatever that looks like for them. And we don't have that overhead. So
Yeah.
we're ready when everybody else is able to start up, we'll start up with them. I think that more than answered your question, probably. Sorry.
No. Thank you. Thank you for this. We're going to get going, and I want to thank you for your time. And as I said, you're a treasure. Continue doing what you do, because you have a fan in me anyway, and many people.
I'm a big fan of yours too. Thanks for including me on this.
Yeah. Yep. And I will see you, and you be well, and you be safe, and we'll talk hopefully someday in person.
Yeah. Hopefully we can
Face to face.
go together.
Face to
sometime.
face, 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I miss rod hugs a lot.
Yeah. That's
Save me one.
yeah. We'll talk. All right. And hug.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rod.
Hug 6 feet apart, but it's see you then.